Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know you may have other things in your mind, like perhaps hurricane preparation, but we're so grateful that you took the time to join us today because we know how important it is for our students to have just the best education and be prepared for the expectations for each new school year. I want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Monica Meeks. I'm one of the K-5 specialists in the Department of Academic Services with Duval County Public Schools, and we're just really welcoming you today to our November presentation, which, as you can see on the screen, the focus will be on third grade promotion, getting to fourth grade. So let's get started. The purpose of our presentation is to familiarize yourselves with parents with the third grade promotional criteria. And we'll go over some of the basics of the third grade promotion criteria and how it affects your child. I wanted to start off the meeting today on camera so that you can put a face with the voice and the name. And I will have my camera off, but feel free to turn your mic off if you have a question, or most importantly, put it in the chat so we can have a way of addressing that throughout the presentation. And just give me a minute to adjust my camera. Now, before you can see retention in third grade. This is a portion of the state statute that began in 2002 to 2003 school year. It states that all third grade students who do not score at or above a level 2 on the FAST assessment will be automatically retained. So this is a part of our state requirement, and we wanted to make sure we started with that because that lays the groundwork for the processes that will come in the presentation. Now, while this seems very final, there are other ways your child can be promoted beyond the level 2 on the FAST test. These are called good cause exemptions. And we will walk through each one of these and I will talk you through them so that you can understand all the ways in which your child can be promoted. They're called good cause exemptions, other ways and other opportunities. As you can see on the screen, there are 6 good cause exemptions, and we're going to go through those. Let's start with this first one. The good cause exemption, ELL, let's familiarize you with this one. Although students are retained, and if they do not score level 2 or higher, they're retained. However, this is another opportunity for students to be promoted. This particular good cause exemption is directed towards our ELL students, those kids who are learning English, that we consider them as well limited English proficient students. However, to qualify for this good cause exemption, that student must have had at least have less than 2 years of instruction in an English for Speakers of Other Language program, or ESOL program. If that student has had fewer than 2 years, and also we will look at the initial date of entry that that student arrived in a school in the United States. So we will look at those 2 pieces of criteria and determine whether or not this child will qualify for the ELL good cause exemption. Just take a couple of minutes and take a couple of seconds and look at that one. That's one of the 6 good cause exemptions. This next one is an ESE good cause exemption. This is particularly for those students with disabilities who have an IEP, and they may qualify for promotion in one of 2 ways. The first option is for students who receive instruction using alternative standards. Students with disabilities whose individual education plan indicates that participation in the statewide assessment program is not appropriate, and those students will be exempted. Okay, and that is a requirement from one of our other state documents. Next, the second option is for students who receive instruction based on our regular grade level standards, and they have been previously retained. So if this student has an IEP and they have been retained previously, they will qualify for this second ESE good cause exemption. I will read number 5. these who take the statewide standardized ELA assessments, and they also have an IEP that reflects that the student has received intensive reading instruction for more than 2 years, yet they demonstrated deficiency and they were retained in kindergarten, first, second, or third grade. They would also qualify for an ESE good cause exemption. That's 2 of the 6. Let's take a look at the next one. This one is dealing with whether or not that student has been previously retained. This one is a student who does not have an IEP, yet they've been retained previously. They may also qualify for a good cause. This states that students who've received intensive reading intervention for 2 or more years, but they demonstrated deficiency in reading, and they were previously retained in kindergarten, first or second or third grade for a total of 2 years, that student will not be retained more than once in third grade. So looking at those grade years of retention are going to be very important there. Next, we have alternative tests that can also pass a student to fourth grade. While the FAST test will largely be promotion, there are other safety net assessments that are put in place by our district. Our 3 assessments are the STAR assessment, Achieve 3000, and NWEA. Students who score at or above the 50th percentile on the STAR diagnostic, they may be promoted. Also, students who have a Lexile level of 645 and Achieve level on their level set for Achieve 3000, they may be promoted as well. And students who meet a minimum of the 50th percentile on the NWEA may also be promoted. This assessment is given in the spring to any student who didn't qualify for any of the previously mentioned good cause exemptions. And they may have met any, and they may not have met any of the other scores you see on the slide. So again, this is quite a bit of information, but as you can see, we're looking at various data points so that we can make sure that we capture what the kids are able to do so that they can be promoted. This next good cause exemption is based on a portfolio. Okay, the portfolio is used across the district and is typically started early in the school year based on early assessment data factors. Teachers maintain this portfolio, it is kept at school, and they use it and continue to add to it throughout the school year, excuse me, as standards are taught and remediated. So that is the portfolio. Notice if they haven't scored on that level 2 on the FAST test, they can actually pass through the portfolio. I want to pause there to see if there are any questions about the good cause exemptions that were beyond the portfolio. And let me take just a few seconds and see if you have any questions. You can type it in the chats, or you can go ahead and turn off your mic and ask. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and dig a little deeper here into the portfolio opportunities. Any student who has successfully completed the portfolio will be promoted. If your student has scored in the 25th percentile or below on the STAR Fall assessment or 360 or below on the Achieve 3000, it is recommended that you speak with your child's teacher about starting a portfolio for your child. Parents may also request a portfolio at any point during the school year. Just to kind of clarify what we consider a portfolio, the portfolio is done to show students that they can be promoted by showing satisfaction on the Florida reading standards. It's a multitude of standards and texts and question types, and the student has to show that they are proficient and beyond in order to pass each segment of the portfolio. So the Florida defines a portfolio as a systematic collection of evidence used by the teacher to monitor the student's academic growth over a period of time. Now, the portfolio has a very specific set of criteria. It is done the same throughout the district. In order for us to maintain the fidelity of the portfolio work, there is a very specific criteria. So the portfolio has to be organized and it evidence the student's mastery of the language arts standards. And also in our new benchmarks for the grade 3 ELA assessments, we're making sure that there are at least 8 assessed items at the mastery level, as demonstrated by a 70% or above on each example. So if there are 4 questions on the test, the student on a particular passage, that student needs to make at least 3 of those, because that would give them a 75. Okay. If there are 5 questions on there, that student would need to have at least 4 of those, but that would give them above a 70. Let's talk a little bit about the portfolio contents. In the portfolio contents, there are 8 literary reading standards, and that's going to be more like your stories and your narratives. Then there are 9 informational reading standards that are assessed, and that's going to be like your nonfiction and real stories. Now, there are also 2 language standards that will consider you would be considering your conventions and your grammar, punctuation, spelling, usage, mechanics. The student has to pass 54 assessments for a complete eligible portfolio. It's quite a bit of work. And this is why we recommend that teachers start these early in the year and they add to them throughout the school year. Now, in this case, this is a great way for you to see the Florida benchmarks. There is an app that you can download using your phone. You can go to your app store and search for CPALMS. I actually have this on my phone. And you can select CPALMS Standards Viewer, and you can actually get a chance to see the standards that we just mentioned, those 8 literary standards and those 9 informational standards. This is a great way to check these out. If you want to pause and take a picture of that with your phone or a screenshot, I would advise that. Next, here are some other just really rich resources that you can use to assist with your child. It comes from the Florida Center for Reading Research. Very great ways to enrich your child's reading. If you go to we call it in the field, we call it FCRR. That is one of our best friends in terms of what we're able to do with students. Lots and lots of resources there. They're on the cutting edge of all the latest reading research to help us help our students. Really great resources there. Another great screenshot or opportunity for you to take a picture. Now, as a parent, you have already done the first thing. You've expressed an interest. You are definitely showing up in order to realize what are some resources that you can do. I want to be really specific here because this is why you're here. How can you help, and what is it that my student needs to be able to do? One of the things that you can do is just to make sure you discuss if it hasn't been a discussion with your child's teacher about the portfolio. If that's something that you see seems to be a need for your child, that would be a great opportunity for you to bring that up at a conference or in a dojo chat. Next, this talks about how you can help at home. You have sight words that you can do at home. Reading at home is very powerful, and also helping with unknown words. So anything that comes through the house, it is a great idea to have just a variety of conversations with your child about words. And that's one way that they learn vocabulary is through the speaking and interaction and usage of words. So sight words, reading at home, and also helping with unknown words and having them to talk about the unknown word. How is it being used? Um, can you use that in a sentence? There's another word you can replace with that word. Great ways to just keep that great language at home. Let's talk a little bit about sight words specifically. Why do we study sight words? One of the things about sight words is that they don't follow a natural phonetic sequence. So they defy the rules of phonics. Look at the word OF and then the word SAID. Look at those words in the spelling. We know that of the O, when it's alone, it usually makes a short sound, which is ah. But in this case, it makes a sound like a short U. So students learn those words just by looking at them. We call that automaticity, when they can automatically look at that word, because if you ask a student to sound it out, they will say oaf, and it's actually of, almost like UV. In this case, said looks like said. because of the English language and the great vowel shift from Middle English, we know that that's not pronounced said, it is pronounced said. So these are the reasons why we practice sight words, and we have students to look at them and practice them over and over again until as soon as they see them, they can just say those words. And also these words, they lack a significant meaning. I mean, if the word was cup, we can also show a child a picture of a cup. We can show a child a picture of a door, a bike. But in the word, in the place of the word the, it, or and, it's difficult for them to attach an image with that. So we just have to practice those sight words until they become automatic. Also, sight words account for 75% of the words in a text. So we know if we keep practicing the sight words, we know that we will have an opportunity for students to learn most of the words in the text, and they can connect those other more difficult words and actually make meaning. Lastly, you heard me use that field word called automaticity, making sure things are automatic. We want students to be able to see the sight word and have automatic recognition, and it frees up their brains, and they're able to use that cognitive space to focus on the harder words and the meaning. I see here with Miss Mertz, it's typing, and she had a question, and we will see if we can get that answered. She says that if is the portfolio only required if the FAST score is not at a 2, it needs to be at a 2. Yes. So the portfolio is one of the ways that that student can be promoted beyond the FAST test of a 2, score of a 2. More about sight words. You can use the Doge list or the Fry list. They are wonderful lists, and once Googled, they will actually give you the grade levels for the different words. And I just think it's a great idea to start where your child is and have them go all the way up until it starts getting tough. And then you can start hanging in on those particular words. So if your child is in third, obviously, I would start all the way at the pre-primer words and have them read them all the way up to third. And whenever they get a little tough for them, that would be a great place to start your flashcards and your practice at home. Also have the students start reading the words, and again, stop when they miss the words and the flashcards, and play games with the next 10 words on the list. That'd be great. Matching is a great game to play, having two of the same words on a different card, and have them face down, and then have the child to flip the card over, and if they pronounce it right, they can then go hunt for the match to it. And these are just great. You can maybe give them 5 extra minutes on their a video game, or 5 extra minutes outside to play, and just great ways to encourage and to motivate them. And those sight words are just such a great foundation on which to build for future reading. Next, I wanted to look at some other this is a pretty small screen, but I wanted you to see some important ways to incorporate the various sight words. So we talked about making flashcards, we've talked about using Quizlet, and you see that word at the top, fluency. I call that kind of a edubabble type of word. That word talks about how does the student, is a student sounding robotic? Does the student have phrasing and proper phrasing and intonation to their voice when they're reading? Learning those sight words are also going to help with fluency. This is a snip from the FCRR site. Each thing there, each little red line there with the dot next to it, with the bullet next to it, it represents a link, and it will take you to activities that you can also do at home. FCRR has done quite a bit of work for our students. Here's some other examples of games that you can incorporate to help with sight words. I talked about the matching. We've got bingo, the fly swat. The kids love that in classrooms. um, just a variety of wonderful games to encourage your students to make learning fun. And the more they're learning, the more they read, the more they want to read, they want to show off. So definitely make sure you take a great screenshot of this one, and get some really fun activities. And it's great to just use plain old fast flashcards. They do have sight word flashcards that are pre-made at different places like the grocery store and sometimes the dollar store, but also you can make your own and make it fun, and even have the students to help if they have that ability. And I wanted to just take a moment and pause and see if you had any questions about sight words or any other suggestions that have been successful for you or your students? Wait a couple of seconds and we'll get going. Any other questions? Feel free to type it in the chats if you like. Talk about the benefits of reading at home with your students. It is incredible. If we look at this various students here, it says that student A, student B, student C, and how much they read. Look how many words that student A gets when that student has read 20 minutes per day. By the end of the year, they have read over 1 million words. They have either heard them, seen them, or read them themselves, over 1 million words. While a student C, who reads maybe 1 minute a day, has only read about 8,000 words per year. And it states at the bottom, if they start reading for 20 minutes per night in kindergarten, by the end of sixth grade, student A will have read for the equivalent of 60 school days. Student B will have read for 12 school days, and student C will have read for 3. Let's look over in that last column to the right. It talks about where these students score in their standardized tests, on their standardized tests. That student that reads 20 minutes per day scores in the 90th percentile. 90th percentile. Where that student that reads 5 minutes per day will score in the 50th percentile. That's about the average student, 50th percentile, not percent, but percentile. And then we have student C, who only reads additional 1 minute a day. And this is beyond your regular reading throughout the school day. So guys, just get books in hands, magazines, comic books, anything that has a series of words, and make sure you have a print-rich home and you're reading and talking. And even sometimes we can do fun activities with the books or around the books with your other kids. I know we had a little neighborhood book club from the American Girls books from my daughters when they were little, and it was just really fun. We met in the backyard and it was just really informal, but we had an opportunity to read and we did some of the crafts in the books and just find ways that fit your personality, your skill set, and your time to make it happen. And we can see right there that is researched evidence of the power of why we should be reading at home. Sometimes parents aren't really sure, well, what do I talk about when we read? What do I talk about? How do I ask them questions? How do I know I'm asking the right things? I want to offer these few suggestions. This is another great Kodak moment. If you want to take a shot of your picture of the screenshot here, before the student reads, and they will be hearing some of this in their classrooms before reading activities, during reading activities, and things you do after you read. So if they're reading a story, which we call a literary text, you can ask them to take a guess about what might happen in the book. They may want to look at the title. We call it taking a picture walk. They can look at the pictures and then gather some information from the pictures. They can ask questions. What question? Formulate questions. Think about a question that you might want answered by the book. And then they can make a connection. What does the book remind you of? Great ways to engage students in the book before they read a word. While they're reading, you can ask them to predict what will happen next. They can even make further connections. How do you feel about the main character? Question, what would you do differently if you were one of the characters? Next, after they read, you can ask them to think about what you learned. Who was your favorite character? Why? Did a character change the story? Did the character change at all in the story? Where did the story take place? And they can summarize the book and tell you what it's about. Summarizing is a very key skill for students. It helps to embed the learning, and it helps them, and it also lets you know, did they understand what they read in the proper sequence? So they could start at the beginning and tell what the story was all about. Next, for informational text, within the text, you can ask them, this would be your nonfiction. If they read a story about a historical event or an animal or plants or even a state, that's your informational text or your nonfiction. What did you learn from reading this book while they're reading it? What information from this book is important to remember? What is this word? Read and think about what you think it means. Beyond the text, what new information did you learn from this book? What did you already know? For example, did you see a series of things happening in order? What information can you get from the sequence about the text? What outcomes or effects did the writer describe? What are some specific examples of the text the writer used that interest you? So these are great questions to ask about any book at all. And I think it's really important for students to do a lot of selecting of their own books. Sometimes parents are concerned about the books being too easy or too hard, but I think the fact that they've selected a book and you can go from there and ask these questions is a great place to start as well. What do I do when my child doesn't know a word? That happens quite often. And we talked about some questions that you can ask. And think about some of these questions. Encourage your readers to think about what they're reading. And if they say the wrong word, which happens a lot, you can ask, does that make sense? Maybe the picture clue. So, what you're doing is you're encouraging them to use their own toolbox of what happens when I get to a word I don't know. Instead of just telling them the word or even saying, go look the word up, these are some things that they can do when they're by themselves and it's just them and a text or them on a test. So they can think about what they're reading. They can maybe think about the full topic. What is it all about? And how might this word fit in? Also, they can ask themselves, or you can ask, does it make sense? Maybe there is a picture nearby that will help them read the words. Once they get to third grade, what I've noticed in my career is that the grades 3 through 5, those intermediate elementary students, they look less at those picture clues than those K through 2 students, and we have to remind them in third through fifth to make sure that they're actually using those clues to help them, those picture clues to help them. They're not there for decoration. They may actually help you pull meaning from for the word. Also, they can think about what's happening in the story right now and how that word may be helpful. Go back to the beginning of the sentence and start it again. They can even skip over the word and look and read to the end of the sentence. We know that's using context clues. They can look at the context and figure out the meaning of the word. I noticed that in classrooms today, we're teaching students there are different types of context clues. Sometimes there may be the word or in there. They may say a microwave or a new innovation, something like that. And they can use those other clues to help them figure out the meaning of the word. But those are just great moments. Imagine if the student had one of those moments each week in a home, not 7 days, but just one day, how much further they would be along. So don't forget reading at home and how to help them when they get stuck on a word. And someone did ask when I was doing a presentation, is it okay for them to still use a dictionary? Absolutely. Absolutely. But we know that we don't carry dictionaries around with us. We use our phones. They can also look up words on their phone if they get stuck. That's not a bad resort way to do it. But we do want to make sure that we give them um, tools that they could use if they are maybe on an assessment or reading for pleasure and they don't have those other electronic devices with them. Visual clues from words. They can look at the first letter of the word, say the sound. Okay, they've got the b sound and they say it started climbing a tree. Let's think what starts with the b sound and climbs trees. Would it be a bee? Might it be a bear? What might that be? And that is very helpful using those context clues. Do you see a part of the word in a word you already know? If you have the word playground, we call it sometimes a cover up method. They can use their little index finger and cover up part of the word. And almost every time I've seen a student use the cover up method, they have figured out the word. Sometimes when they're just staring at it and trying to sound it out without any kind of physical barrier there to remove the other part that's tricky, they just sometimes don't always get it. But I would honestly say almost every time I've seen a child cover up part of the word, they can get a few of those sounds. They can maybe figure out that AY and they can figure out that I've seen that in the word day or PL. I've seen that somewhere. So please remind them to look for word, call that chunking, and look for word chunks that they already know. That's an incredible strategy. And these are things that they're hearing at school and they're practicing at school. And to have it reinforced at home is just such a powerful, powerful way to build our little readers. Next up, One of my favorites, obviously, I'm a language arts person, relating it to talking. Does that sound right? Can you point to that word that sounded wrong? You read blank. Is that how we say it? And just bringing it back to talking. And then some of them will go, no, that doesn't make any sense. And then they will figure it out. To give them those moments to figure it out are so powerful because you're building their own belief in their own reading, and they'll see that word later and be able to do it sometimes without the help. So relating it to talking is very important. This title of this is talking. The next couple of slides, it mentions taking care of our students. How the folks that are third grade, it is so important that you continue to support your child. And there are going to be lots of tests at school. They have some weekly tests with our benchmark curriculum. We have some every 3 weeks, we have a unit test. We have some interim tests, and we have the state test and a couple of district tests. We're trying just to make sure that we know what students are learning and how to adjust our teaching based on the results of our little tests. And sometimes they're medium tests, sometimes they're big tests towards the end of the year. I'm going to pause for just a moment to address Mrs. Mertz's question. Ms. Mertz, that is an incredible question because I wanted to mention to you, she asks, when students are reading at home, should they practice reading out loud more often or reading silently to themselves? There are some students who have IEPs and different ways to individualize their instruction that they have to read out loud. There are some students who read out loud just out of habit. What I would try to do is, as you're at home, I would also talk with the teacher, and I would have them to read a little out loud and a little silently, and then pose some of those same questions and see whether or not your student is able to get those questions correct based on what they're reading. Some students have just gotten in the habit of reading out loud. And what we are finding is that when they read silently, they read, I don't have the evidence to say twice as fast, but they read much faster when they're reading silently without moving their lips. But there are some students who get better comprehension when they move their lips or if they're reading out loud. So that is a very good question. So I would definitely do your own, activity of seeing whether or not they can really glean comprehension from both ways, and then adjust and also speak with the teacher. And I don't know your child's specific strengths as well. Test days, I always feel like if we've prepared all year, it's just a regular day. It's really better than a regular day because this is a day we can show off. Yes, I think so. I did, and again, if Ms. Mertz, it goes back to your child's individual strengths as well. So I would definitely love to know how that worked out for you to see whether or not that child is able to glean comprehension from the silent, or sometimes they're silent and the lips are moving, and sometimes they're out loud reading, and sometimes they're completely silent and just tracking the lines of text with their eyes. Those are all various ways to read, and we see it all in the classroom. And I wanted to go back to this idea about testing. Um, there are so many things we can do. We know that often they'll say, have a great breakfast, have a calm morning routine. But also, there are tests throughout the week and throughout the year. So, practice test taking, anxiety reducing practices even throughout the year. It doesn't have to wait until the big fast test at the end of the year, or one of the PMs or the PMAs throughout the year. Those are the types of things we want to do on a regular basis. So students get in the habit of, okay, it's time for a test. I'm going to do my deep breathing. And also, there is like that positive pressure, like, I can't wait to see how you're doing. Or maybe you can put a special note in that child's lunchbox. And one of my favorite notes, I think it came from a commercial, when you add the note that says, here, open this note if you do well, open this note if you don't do well. And both notes say, I'm proud of you. Those are just such great moments for students. And making sure that you don't put too much pressure on your student, even though we know that you want them to get to that next grade level. That extra pressure is also taking away their cognitive ability, because they need to be able to think through the questions. So practice. What do I do on the day of the test? I wake up, I think positive, I have a great calm morning routine, and be encouraging and let them know how proud you are of them. And when they may not have done so well, we can circle back and say, that's fine. Now we know what to practice. Now we know what to practice. And it says here how the child visualize success, encourage them to rehearse what it feels like. I know my father was a coach and he always talked to his players about visualize the ball going in the basket, visualize the ball not touching the rim, and and visualize yourself going through the rope of the track at the end of the track meet. They visualize what the clock is going to say when you run through the rope of the track meet. That visualization is extremely real. So have your child visualize the success. Visualize that they've got a 100 or an 80 at the top of their paper, and just continue to stroke them in that manner. So when it's time for the real test, they will be used to, okay, I'm now channeling my test taking super heroism. So, and work with them on to focus on breathing. At the beginning of the test, oftentimes teachers will say, all right, guys, this is a time for you to meditate. This is a time for you to have a quiet time, or this is time for us to pass out pencils. We're going to be perfectly quiet. Have your child maybe focus on breathing. We know that deep breathing is a great way to reduce stress. It says stress is often caused by insufficient oxygen to the brain. So take time to do a number of deep cleansing breaths, exhaling slowly, focusing on breathing, and taking some time when they can feel themselves being stressed. So you model that. Some teachers do this before tests, but if you can also encourage your child to, advocate for their own stress relief, it'd be just a beautiful thing. Encourage your child to review the night before the test, but avoid cramming. A little bit goes a long way. Cramming is very rarely effective. So, if they're practicing these great test taking strategies, and again, communicate with your teacher, how can I help them prepare for the test when they're doing multiple choice questions, when they're doing the various question types? How can I help them so that we can schedule those things throughout the whole year? It says a systematic schedule of short reviews are better than clumping everything in the night before. Using positive language when talking about the expectations of the test. I know as a teacher and as a mom, I often would say, I can't wait to see how much you've learned, versus, do well, don't fail, and to try to avoid negative wording, such as you're going to fail this test if you don't study. And if you don't study, you're not going to go to the fourth grade. Those things are not going to they're not going to produce a lot of positive results, even on the student who is prepared. And plan a fun outing or treat for your child after the test. I know there was a movie theater near our school, our old school, right there on Phillips, and we would always, that was our, after the end of the big test, we would just go straight to the movie theater at the end of testing season. And keep a positive attitude, and just remind your child that tests are a way for them to show what they know, and it should be something they should be excited about and to do their best. We don't want them so relaxed that they're just bubbling anything, or we do want them to have a sense of importance. And there is sometimes a fine line from sending the message that this is important, but yet we're not stressing out about it. So making sure you know you're a child, and making sure that that test should demonstrate what they have learned rather than the consequences of not passing. I want to pause there for a few seconds and see if anyone has any questions about that, because we're reaching the close of our presentation this evening. I hope this information has been helpful. It has been a pleasure being with you tonight, and I'm such a fan of teaching and learning, and I'm so excited to see parents to take time to just dedicate themselves to, how do I get my student to the next level, and give them, make sure they can reach success in the end. And on behalf of the Academic Services Department, we thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you again, and good evening.